Once upon a time, there was a woman who wished with all her heart for a child. She had no children and was very lonely. One day, she went to see a wise old fairy and asked for help. The fairy gave her a tiny seed and said, "Plant this in a flower pot, and you will soon have a child." The woman thanked the fairy and hurried home. She planted the seed in a flower pot and took great care of it. Before long, a beautiful flower bloomed. It looked like a large tulip with bright, colorful petals. One day, as the flower opened fully, the woman saw something amazing. Inside the flower sat a tiny girl, no bigger than a thumb. The woman was so happy and decided to name the girl Thumbelina. Thumbelina was very small, but she was also very beautiful. She slept in a walnut shell, which was lined with soft petals, and used a rose petal as her blanket. During the day, she would sit on the table and sing sweet songs. Her voice was so lovely that it filled the house with joy. One night, as Thumbelina was sleeping, a big, ugly toad hopped through the window and saw her. The toad thought, "What a perfect little bride for my son." Without thinking twice, the toad grabbed Thumbelina, put her on a leaf, and carried her away to the muddy pond where she lived with her son. The next morning, when Thumbelina woke up, she found herself in the middle of the pond on a large lily pad. She looked around and saw the ugly toad and her son, who was even uglier. The toad smiled and said, "This is my son. You will marry him, and you will live with us in the pond." Thumbelina was very upset. She did not want to marry the toad or live in the muddy pond. She started to cry. Just then, some fish who were swimming by heard her crying. They felt sorry for her. "Poor little girl," they said. "She doesn't belong here." So, the fish decided to help Thumbelina. They nibbled through the stem of the lily pad until it broke. The lily pad floated away, carrying Thumbelina far from the toads. Thumbelina floated down the stream, feeling relieved but still scared and alone. She passed through many places and met different creatures. At one point, a butterfly flew by and saw her on the lily pad. The butterfly was kind and helped Thumbelina by tying her to the lily pad with a blade of grass so that she could float faster down the stream. For a while, Thumbelina enjoyed floating along with the butterfly's help. But soon, a big beetle spotted her. "What a pretty little girl," thought the beetle. He swooped down, grabbed Thumbelina, and flew up into the trees. Thumbelina was frightened, but the beetle didn't mean to harm her. He just thought she looked strange because she wasn't a beetle like him. Soon, other beetles came to look at her, and they all said, "She has only 2 legs. She isn't one of us." The beetle felt embarrassed and decided to leave Thumbelina alone. He dropped her gently on a large daisy, and off he flew. Poor Thumbelina was left alone again, far away from home, with no idea what to do. Summer passed. And then autumn came. Thumbelina wandered through the fields. But now the weather was getting colder. The flowers were fading, and the leaves were falling. She had no home and no warm clothes. Finally, she came to the door of a field mouse who lived in a small, cozy house under the ground. The kind field mouse invited Thumbelina inside. "You can stay with me for the winter," said the field mouse. "But you must help me keep my house tidy and tell me stories." Thumbelina was happy to have a warm place to stay, and she agreed to help. One day, the field mouse told Thumbelina that they were going to have a visitor. "My neighbor Mr. Mole is coming to see us," she said. "He's very rich and lives in a grand house underground. You must be polite to him because he's very important." Mr. Mole arrived, and he was very polite, but he didn't like the sun or the fresh air. He lived in the dark tunnels and didn't care for the beauty of nature. Thumbelina, on the other hand, loved the sunshine and flowers, so she didn't like Mr. Mole very much. Still, she was polite and kind to him. Mr. Mole soon began to visit often, and the field mouse told Thumbelina that he wanted to marry her. Thumbelina was unhappy about this. She didn't want to marry Mr. Mole and live underground, never seeing the sunlight again. But the field mouse thought it was a good match because Mr. Mole was wealthy. One day, as Thumbelina and Mr. Mole were walking through his tunnels, they found a swallow lying on the ground. The swallow was still alive but very weak. Thumbelina felt sorry for the bird, especially since winter was coming. She cared for the swallow, covering it with soft leaves and keeping it warm. Slowly, the swallow regained its strength. All winter long, Thumbelina visited the bird and took care of it in secret. When spring came, the swallow was strong enough to fly again. It thanked Thumbelina for saving its life and asked, "Would you like to come with me to a warm, faraway land?" Thumbelina thought about it. She didn't want to marry Mr. Mole, and she missed the sunshine and flowers. So, she agreed to go with the swallow. The bird carried Thumbelina on its back, and together they flew over mountains and forests, far away to a beautiful land full of flowers and sunshine. In this magical land, everything was perfect. Thumbelina met the king of the flowers, who was just her size. He had delicate wings like a butterfly and wore a crown made of gold. The king of the flowers was so charmed by Thumbelina's beauty and kindness that he asked her to be his queen. Thumbelina, now finally happy and at peace, agreed. The Flower King gave Thumbelina a pair of wings so that she could fly from flower to flower with him.